Husband tried to force me to be a stay-at-home mom during labor. 6 months later, I gave him news he never saw coming. I'm Jessica, 32F, and I've been married to James, 34M, for a little over a year. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue 4 years ago. I was immediately drawn to James's charm and sense of humor. He was different from the guys I usually dated, more laid back and easygoing. We hit it off right away and started dating soon after. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we had moved in together. James was attentive and supportive of my career as a marketing executive. He'd often surprise me with dinner after a long day at work or leave encouraging notes in my lunch bag. I thought I had found my perfect match. About 2 years into our relationship, we started talking about marriage and kids. We both wanted children someday, but I was clear that I wanted to wait until I was more established in my career. James seemed fine with this at the time. He'd say things like, "I love how ambitious you are, and our kids will have such a great role model in you." We got engaged on our 3rd anniversary. It was a romantic proposal. James took me back to the park where we had our first date and got down on one knee at sunset. I was over the moon and immediately started planning our wedding. Then, about 3 months before the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. It was unexpected and honestly a bit scary. We hadn't planned on having kids so soon. But after the initial shock wore off, we were both excited. We decided to move up the wedding and had a small ceremony with just close family and friends. At first, everything seemed perfect. James was caring, supportive, and we were excited to start our family together. He'd come to all my prenatal appointments, helped set up the nursery, and even started reading parenting books. But things took a drastic turn in the months leading up to our son's birth. It all started when we began discussing our future plans in more detail. I've always been career-oriented. It's a big part of who I am. My mom raised me to be independent and taught me the importance of having my own identity outside of being a wife and mother. I made it clear from the beginning that I wanted to return to work after taking maternity leave. James seemed fine with this initially, but as my due date approached, he started making comments about how it would be best for the baby if I stayed home full-time. At first, they were subtle hints. He'd mention how his coworker's wife loved being a stay-at-home mom or how babies need constant attention in their first few years. I tried to have rational discussions with James about this, explaining that my career was important to me and that we could find a balance between work and family. I pointed out that many women successfully juggle careers and motherhood, but he became increasingly insistent, bringing up how his mother had been a stay-at-home mom and how much he appreciated that growing up. James's mother, Helen, has always been a point of contention in our relationship. She's a lovely woman in many ways, but she has very traditional views on marriage and family. From the beginning, she made it clear that she thought a woman's place was in the home. I tried to brush off her comments for James's sake, but it was clear her influence on him ran deep. Things really came to a head about a month before my due date. We were having what I thought was a casual conversation about childcare options when James suddenly declared that he expected me to quit my job and stay home with our son until he turned 18. I was shocked and told him that was completely unreasonable. This led to a huge argument where James accused me of being selfish and not putting our family first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with, the one who had always supported my ambitions. It felt like a bait and switch, like he had hidden his true feelings until he thought I was trapped. From that point on, there was constant tension between us. We'd bicker over the smallest things, and James would find ways to bring the stay-at-home mom issue into every conversation. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about how our son would be raised by strangers if I went back to work. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I tried to talk to my friends about it, but most of them couldn't relate. They either didn't have kids yet or had chosen to be stay-at-home moms themselves. I felt increasingly isolated and unsure of myself. Was I being selfish for wanting to continue my career? Was I a bad mother for not wanting to stay home full-time? Then came the day my water broke. I was having intense contractions and told James we needed to go to the hospital. Instead of rushing to help me, he stood there and said he wouldn't take me unless I agreed to quit my job and be a full-time mom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was in labor, and my husband was trying to blackmail me. I told James he was being ridiculous and to give me my phone so I could call a cab. He refused, saying we needed to settle this now. I was in too much pain to argue, so I managed to make my way to our neighbor's apartment and asked them for help. They were shocked but quickly agreed to drive me to the hospital. James followed us in his car and was there for the birth of our son, but things haven't been the same since. He's angry that I went to the neighbors for help and keeps saying I embarrassed him. He's been telling family and friends that I overreacted and that he was just trying to have an important conversation before the baby came. I'm furious that he would use such a vulnerable moment to try and force me into a decision I'm not comfortable with. I keep replaying that moment in my head, wondering how the man I married could do something so cruel. It's been 2 weeks since our son was born, and James and I are barely speaking. My mother has been staying with us to help out, which has been a blessing because I don't feel comfortable being alone with James right now. He's still insisting that I need to quit my job, and I'm seriously considering divorce. I never thought our marriage would fall apart like this, especially right after having a baby. I look at our son and feel overwhelmed with love, but also sadness that his early days are being overshadowed by this conflict. I worry about what kind of example we're setting for him. Part of me wonders if I should just give in to keep the peace. Maybe James is right, and our son would be better off with a stay-at-home mom. But then I think about the resentment I would feel, giving up a career I've worked so hard for. And I worry about the message it would send to our son about women's roles and the power dynamics in relationships. I've started looking into my options, researching divorce lawyers, and trying to figure out what single motherhood might look like. But I'm terrified of making such a big decision. What if I'm overreacting? What if I'm throwing away a good marriage over one bad moment? Am I the asshole for refusing to be a stay-at-home mom and considering divorce after my husband's ultimatum during labor? I feel like I'm going crazy and could use some outside perspective. How do I navigate this situation while also being the best mother I can be to my newborn son? Update 1. It's been about a month since my original post, and I wanted to give an update on the situation with James. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective and realize that I wasn't overreacting to James's behavior. After my mom left, James and I finally had a long talk about everything that. Bringing up studies about the benefits of stay-at-home parenting and telling stories about how much James benefited from having her at home full-time. It's clear they're trying to pressure me into quitting my job. My friends have been divided on the issue. Some think I'm overreacting and that I should try to work things out with James for the sake of our son. Others are appalled by his behavior and have offered their spare rooms if I need to leave. Their conflicting advice has left me feeling more confused than ever. Through all of this, I've been trying to focus on bonding with my son. He's such a sweet, innocent little thing, completely unaware of the turmoil around him. I find myself wondering what kind of example I want to set for him as he grows up. Do I want him to see a mother who gave up her dreams for the sake of peace? Or one who stood up for herself even when it was difficult? I've started secretly meeting with a divorce lawyer to understand my options. I don't want to make any rash decisions, especially with a newborn, but I also can't imagine spending the rest of my life with someone who doesn't respect my choices and tried to manipulate me at my most vulnerable moment. The lawyer has advised me to start documenting everything. James's comments, any attempts to interfere with my work, conversations with his family. She says it could be important if we end up in a custody battle. The idea of fighting over our son breaks my heart, but I need to be prepared for every possibility. For now, I'm focusing on recovering from childbirth and taking care of my son. I've started looking into childcare options for when my maternity leave ends, even though James doesn't know it yet. I'm also considering seeing a therapist to help me sort through my feelings and make sense of everything that's happened. I know some difficult decisions are coming up, and I'm trying to prepare myself mentally and emotionally for whatever happens next. But with a newborn to care for and so much uncertainty in my marriage, it feels like I'm standing on shifting sand, unsure of where to step next. Update 2. It's been another month, and things have only gotten worse with James. I returned to work part-time last week, and it's been a nightmare. The day before I was due to start, James accidentally canceled my childcare arrangements. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, "Guess you'll have to stay home now." I was furious, but managed to get my mom to watch the baby for the first few days while I sorted out new childcare. It was a stressful scramble, but I was determined not to let James sabotage my return to work. Since then, James has been doing everything he can to make working difficult for me. He'll call me constantly during the day with emergencies that turn out to be nothing. Once he called saying our son had a high fever, only for me to rush home and find out he was perfectly fine. Another time, he showed up at my office unannounced with the baby, saying he couldn't handle it and needed me to come home. My boss has been understanding so far, but I know it can't continue like this. At home, James alternates between giving me the silent treatment and picking fights over every little thing. He started making snide comments about me abandoning our son and how he's going to grow up feeling unloved because I'm too selfish to stay home. It's gotten to the point where I dread coming home from work, knowing I'll face either icy silence or a barrage of criticism. James's family has become even more involved. His mother, Helen, has taken to showing up unannounced during the day, ostensibly to help, but really to criticize my parenting and housekeeping. She'll make comments about how the house isn't clean enough or how the baby seems fussy, implying it's because I'm not there enough. It's clear she's reporting everything back to James, as he'll bring up things she said in our arguments. The final straw came last night. I overheard James on the phone with his mother, saying he was going to make life so difficult for me that I'd have no choice but to quit my job. He talked about hiding my car keys, messing with my alarm clock, and even hinting to my boss that I was looking for other jobs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like he was plotting against me instead of supporting me as a partner should. I confronted James immediately, and we had the biggest fight of our marriage. He didn't even try to deny what he was planning, saying he was doing what's best for our family, whether I liked it or not. When I told him his behavior was abusive and controlling, he laughed and said I was being dramatic. He accused me of putting my feminist ideals above our son's well-being and said that if I really loved our family, I'd be willing to make sacrifices. That conversation was a turning point for me. I realized that no matter how much I tried to compromise or explain my perspective, James was never going to respect my choices. His vision of our family was fundamentally incompatible with mine, and he was willing to resort to manipulation and sabotage to get his way. I've made my decision. I'm filing for divorce. I've already called my lawyer and started making arrangements. I know it won't be easy being a single mom, but I'd rather do that than stay in a marriage where I'm constantly disrespected and manipulated. I'm scared about the future. I worry about how this will affect our son, about the challenges of co-parenting with someone who doesn't respect me, about balancing work and single motherhood. But I also feel a sense of relief, like I'm finally taking control of my life again. I've started looking for a new place to live. My mom has offered to let us stay with her, but I think I need to establish my independence. I'm also working on a plan to adjust my work schedule to accommodate single parenthood. My boss has been incredibly supportive through all of this, which is a huge relief. James doesn't know I'm planning to leave yet. I'm waiting until I have everything in order before I tell him. I'm nervous about how he'll react, but I know this is the right decision for me and for our son in the long run. Update 3. It's been 6 months since I filed for divorce, and I wanted to give a final update on how things have turned out. The divorce process was difficult, especially with a young baby involved. James fought me every step of the way, trying to paint me as an unfit mother because I worked outside the home. He tried to argue that he should have primary custody since he was willing to stay home full-time with our son. It was a stressful and emotionally draining battle. Thankfully, my lawyer was amazing and helped me gather evidence of James's manipulative behavior. We had documentation of his attempts to sabotage my work, testimony from my coworkers about his disruptive behavior, and even recordings of some of his more aggressive statements. It wasn't pleasant to air all of this in court, but it was necessary to protect my rights as a parent. In the end, we were granted joint custody, with me having primary physical custody. James gets our son every other weekend and one evening during the week. He's still bitter about the outcome and often tries to make exchanges difficult, but I'm learning to set firm boundaries. I've started using a co-parenting app to communicate with him, which helps keep things civil and documented. I'm fully back at work now and loving it. My boss has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. I was even offered a promotion recently, which I accepted. It's challenging balancing work and single motherhood, but I've found a rhythm that works for us. I've had to make some adjustments to my schedule and expectations, but I'm proud of how I'm managing everything. My son is thriving. He's a happy, healthy baby who lights up my world. Seeing him grow and develop new skills every day reinforces that I made the right decision. I found a great daycare where he's well cared for while I'm at work, and I make sure our evenings and weekends are full of quality time together. As for James, he's still insisting that I'll come to my senses eventually. He makes comments about how our son will resent me for working, but I'm confident that's not true. I'm teaching my son that both parents can work and still be loving, involved parents. James's visitations are going okay, though he often tries to pump our son for information about our home life or sends him back with passive-aggressive notes about my parenting. James's family, especially his mother Helen, have been a constant source of stress. They've tried to intervene in the custody arrangements and still make comments about how I'm depriving my son of a proper family life. I've had to limit their contact with my son during my custody time to protect my own mental health. On the positive side, my relationship with my own family has grown stronger through this ordeal. My mom has been an incredible support, helping with childcare and offering emotional support when things get tough. My friends have rallied around me too, offering babysitting, home-cooked meals, and shoulders to cry on when needed. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the emotional fallout from the divorce and to develop strategies for co-parenting with James. It's been helpful to have a neutral party to talk to about everything that's happened. There are still challenging days. Sometimes I doubt my decision, especially when I see other families that seem so perfect on the surface. But then I remember the anxiety and resentment I felt in my marriage, and I know I made the right choice for myself and my son. Looking towards the future, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm focusing on building a happy life for myself and my son. It may not be the traditional family unit that James wanted, but it's filled with love, respect, and the freedom to be ourselves. I'm excited to watch my son grow up and to continue advancing in my career. This experience has taught me a lot about myself and what I want out of life. I'm stronger than I ever knew. and I'm proud of the example I'm setting for my son about standing up for yourself and your values. It may not be the life I initially imagined, but I'm determined to make it a happy and fulfilling one for both of us.